This is a bad one, Sean. Saw more than my share of those when I was a chaplain, Miller said. You ever see anyone decapitated? Miller grimaced. No, I never saw that. Not during my watch. He shook his head and took another sip from his mug. Feels like people are becoming angrier. That's the scene. That's a little taste of John Byron if you haven't already met him in any of the other books.
That was really good. I love the way you read too. There's definitely authors who are really good at reading their work, and there are some they need practice. But that was really well read.
Thank you.
I did want to make mention a comment over on Facebook. Maddie Deerimple, she's going to be one of our guests this week or next week. She said,
good writer.
She said it was a great story about your experience at the Crime Bake with your first novel.
Good, thank you, Maddie.
That's one thing. We'll get into that later too. But that's one thing that a lot of people have mentioned is the Crime Bake down in Massachusetts, and hopefully one of these days I can get to that. But we'll get back to that and talk about conventions and things like that too. So, what is a detective sergeant? What are his or her duties?
Well, in the hierarchy of the police department, it's the counterpart to the patrol sergeant. So the patrol sergeant in the uniform capacity would be the person who supervises directly the patrolman, everyone out, the line units on the street, and the detective sergeant is in charge of the detective bureau. So you're in my particular case, I had 8 detectives that answered to me that were the detectives that worked all the violent crime cases, everything from simple assault, domestic violence assault, sexual assault, bank robberies, homicides, the whole thing. Everything you can think of that involves crimes against people is what they investigated. And then I also had the 4 evidence technicians and property evidence coordinator, that kind of thing. So really everything that sort of falls under that umbrella of investigative stuff is what the detective sergeant does. And in the Portland Police Department, the detective sergeants answer directly to a lieutenant. And that lieutenant would be the person, like Tim Cotton we had talked about, that's the person that holds the rank of the commander of the Criminal Investigation Division.
So John Byron, he's a detective sergeant. Is he kind of modeled after you? Is he modeled after, or more fictitious, or does he have to? Do you have any of those elements in your books as far as what he has to do, who he has to supervise, and stuff?
I think I've taken a little bit of liberty in that. In Portland's case, the detective sergeant does work cases, but primarily they take more of a supervisory role in homicides, as opposed to, you can't supervise all those people and then still be a primary on a murder. So I've taken some liberties with that, but I did it for a purpose, because having him be a detective sergeant gives him the autonomy to do a lot of things that a detective wouldn't be able to do necessarily. So in some departments that would probably fly the way I've done it in these books, but in Portland, it would be more a supervisory role. So, there are obviously parts of John that are very familiar to me, that are probably more me than not. But as time has gone on, and really, especially after writing that first book, I didn't even call him John Byron at that point. I don't know what I called my main character. I'd have to go back and try to find that manuscript. But he just really sort of revealed himself, like all the characters. The more you write them, the more time you spend with them, they begin to take on their own persona. And sometimes it's vastly different than what I or any writer might have envisioned as they tried to create them. I tried to have a structural outline. But I think he became more of his own person as time went on, and less me, which I think is a good thing, But I struggled with that. I've talked about that in the past. That was one of the things that Kate Flora really helped me with. It's real easy, I think, sometimes in these kinds of things where there's a thriller aspect and a mystery aspect, to try to build your characters or your main character with those strong emotions that we all, look for when you're reading a book or watching, a series or whatever. And The harder ones are the ones that are more personal. I struggled with trying to create realistic vulnerability. I didn't want to show the vulnerable side of John Byron. And I think it's because at that point he hadn't really become his own person yet. And I was afraid that I would be showing my own tender side, as it were. And that's just a harder thing as a writer to do. It requires a lot more honesty, I think, than at that point I was a fledgling novelist that I was willing to give. And that was something that Kate hammered me on, and said that, that was one of those things that you really had to do to round out your character. And so she gave me permission. She said, he isn't you, so it's okay for you to use whatever. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like a light bulb went off, and suddenly John Byron became a real person to me. So much easier to write.
Did you, when you started developing his character, did you at first think maybe just rate a detective with the detective sergeant above him, or was he always going to be, or did he morph into, as you were developing him, I want to make him the detective sergeant where we would have more leeway, or did you just start right off the bat from that?
No, I started like that. And like I said, that was a conscious effort. I just felt like it wouldn't be, I wouldn't want other police officers raising their eyebrows as they were reading these. I wanted to, that pass a straight face test. So there are things in pushback and those kinds of things that John can do as a detective sergeant that it would be much more difficult for a detective to get away with. And I liked having him that one step up the food chain. I thought it gave me a lot more leeway on what I could have for situations I could create for John to make life tough. So he has a supervisory role, and when push comes to shove, he's running the scene, so he can really tell pretty much anybody what's what, even his superiors, if he's actually running the homicide scene himself. But I think it just made a lot more sense from a series standpoint to be able to do that. Plus, it allowed me to address some other things, and I don't want to give too much away on that. But for the readers to follow along, they'll see there are a lot of things that come into play to do with the command structure.
So there was no thought, or very little thought of him being sort of the rogue detective and bucking the detective sergeant, saying, no, you're wrong, this is where it needs to go, kind of thing.
No, it was actually better for him to be the rogue detective sergeant bucking the system and telling the lieutenant this is how it needs to be. So that's kind of how I wanted to do it. And I think any detective sergeant worth their salt has probably found themselves in that situation as well. The needs of the rank really to control what happens. And one of the reasons that I would a lot of times was at odds with my superiors was for that very same reason. The only thing you really care about as a detective sergeant is to get to the truth of the matter on these cases, and to make sure that your detectives have the tools they need to get the job done and do it. And sometimes that means pushing back from the people up above you who have sometimes different goals from getting in the way. So I think that's a very realistic portrayal on how that job is done.
Working for the federal government, there's definitely those times where you get so frustrated at the bureaucracy and the higher ups, not necessarily the first line supervisors, but everybody kind of above that. Do you write that into the stories, or any of that?
Oh, I do. Yeah, no, the budget comes into play, micromanaging comes into play. Trying to give information quickly to the press or to placate their bosses at City Hall comes into play. Comstat comes into play. I had issues with that myself, which those that know me already know that. So you can learn a little bit more about that in that first book, actually. So, but yeah, no, I think we all have that. I think that's one of the stresses, I think, of any government job, that you have all that kind of stuff. It's, as the detective sergeant, my job is not to worry about where the budget lies in an investigation. My job is to use the tools that are available to get that case sorted out, to find the perpetrator, and to hopefully see them prosecuted in the way the law intended, and to try and get justice for the victim and the victim's families. And that's it. I mean, that's really the bottom line. It's that simple. It's very complex, but it's that simple. As an air traffic controller, I'm sure you felt the same way. There's the job that's your first allegiance, and what it is you're supposed to be doing. And sometimes those other things are just noise.
Yep. Yep. Do you ever, without giving anything away, does he kind of tend to maybe think about going down the dark path to in trying to solve the case and stuff, and he knows that this is going to get him in trouble? Does he kind of go in those directions, or does he kind of stick to and just kind of push the envelope without quite breaking it?
Right. That's probably a good way of describing it. That's exactly how John is. John knows where the line is. John will push up against that line. But really, one of the things that I like about him is that he's very ethical, and he sees things. He understands that we all live in a gray world, but he understands black and white, and for him, that is what it's all about. It's being loyal to his detectives, but expecting his detectives to stay, on the right side of things. So he occasionally may make a questionable decision or say something that he shouldn't say or do something that he shouldn't do. But primarily I've gone really kind of straight down the line, and that's one of the things that he's always struggles with, is that, there are times where it would be easier to do that. But it's at the end of the day, he wants the case to hold together. And a real police officer recognizes that anytime you bend those rules, you run the risk of losing your case. So that's one of those things that on TV, on TV and some of the series, it seems like the detectives are committing a burglary an episode. And I always look at my wife and shake my head. I'm thinking, my God, we used to watch the Midsomer Murder series, and I swear to God, there's episodes where they commit 3 burglaries to get evidence. And that doesn't fly in real life. So there are shortcuts, and then there are the right way to do things. And John tries very hard to stay on that path.
I think a successful character is one that what I like to see as well is one that grows, and even if it's a backsliding, but then grows from those backslides. And it sounds like that's the way your character, John, has developed. What you read from your 4th book, he's got that 6-month sobriety thing, but then there's still sort of backsliding and stuff. So are you you said it kind of took off and has a mind of its own now, and
right,
definitely has that growth.
Yeah, he does. And I did that on purpose. I really had, the one thing I enjoy when I read a series is the character arcs. I feel like it's the same thing. Any of the series, whether I'm reading them or I'm watching them on television, I want to see the character grow and change. And like you say, that may involve backsliding, but the more reality with their life, and hopefully they're learning from mistakes and doing things differently or whatever it is, there's some growth to the character. I find that a lot more fulfilling as a reader of things. And so for me, that's the way I wanted to set out to write these. I try to write them so that they will stand alone without giving too much away. But as far as the character arc is concerned, I think there's a benefit to reading them in order. I think that's definitely one of the cool things about this. I mean, I tell people it's not required. Obviously, if George Lucas can do, Star Wars 4, 5, and 6, and then 1, 2, and 3 come afterwards, I guess I can do whatever I want with John Byron. But I think it's better if you read them in order. John definitely goes on a journey, as do some of the other main characters in the series. So
the one thing that I really enjoy reading about a character, especially a main character, is the backstory. Like, be it, from when they were a kid, how did they become who they were and stuff? Is there any of that, at least in your 1st book or throughout, or have you spread that throughout your series? Or if not, do you plan on going back and maybe doing, like you mentioned, like a Star Wars, you started with episode 4, but now you go back and do 1, 2, and 3 as he grows up and something happens for him to become a cop?
Right. Yeah, actually, it's funny because that constantly lives in my head. And every once in a while, someone will ask me that question and remind me of it again, like you just did. There is a backstory, and it really it figures very prominently in Among the Shadows, the 1st book in the series. I wanted to create a character that had that depth, and you would learn more as the series went on about him, and those things would be revealed. But I wanted it to be in such a way that it wasn't just the reader getting the reveal, that John himself was getting a reveal. So the 1st book is very heavy weighted to historical memory for John, because what ends up happening in the 1st book is a former Portland police lieutenant is killed. And John remembers him from his youth because John's father, Reese, was a Portland cop. And so John remembers him being around and that kind of thing. And now he's tasked with trying to solve this guy's murder. And it opens up a whole can of worms, including what happened to John's father, who is deceased when we meet John in this first book. So there's a lot to that. Yeah. And it really, once you've read the book and digested it, I think it really tells you who John is, how he was shaped, how he was formed, and what kind of baggage he's carried in his life that led him to where he is now. So I think, and that really, that theme does sort of thread its way through the series. John has struggled with the loss of that father figure at a young age. And it created problems in his identity. And it's also created that void where every once in a while, other characters will step in and really have their part, their place holding part, and fill that void for John, that sort of paternal thing that's missing in his life. So he had a mentor early on that shows up in that first book that you meet. And then there are other people. The Assistant Attorney General, Jim Ferguson, plays that role for him. Sean Miller, who you just met in the passage I read, also plays that sort of parental role where he's filling that father void for John. There's a lot of that. And he struggles with a number of things. But yeah, there's a pretty good backstory to that. So another thing I did accidentally write, I guess, when I first started the show, I just thought that was a really cool way to start a series. So.
Is he a young guy or sort of middle age or?
No, John, when we first meet him, is approaching 50. He's in his late 40s. He's been on the job for, almost 20 years at that point. And I have to keep doing the math because now I've got him 4 books in. I'm actually working on the 5th one. So I've got him in a ways, and I have to keep remembering where he is in the whole scheme of things. So, but yeah, no, he's seen enough to know, to have it change who he is. It's definitely hardened him, but he has that soft underbelly that he tries to hide from people. And Diane has seen it, as have some other people. So it's kind of good. You get a glimpse of John, and John's trying to keep things close to the vest, like a lot of cops do.
So are these more murder mystery or more sort of murder thriller books?
I guess that really depends on who you ask. I mean, I try to write them so there's enough going on and enough there's enough irons in the fire that it keeps it thriller paced, which is important. But I also try to get the reader to fool themselves into believing they figured it out, and do my best to hold that back as long as I possibly can. For me, the way I write those is, I mean, I know what I like as a reader, and I don't want to know a third of the way into the book who did it. That just sort of feels like if it gets to that point, then I'm wasting my time. What I want to think a third of the way through the book is that I think I know who did it, and then be wrong at the end of the book. I like it if the writer does it in such a way that I keep changing my mind and talking myself out of it. And then at the end, the reveal isn't what I thought, or I do oh my God, I should have figured that out. I love that as a reader. And so I try to write my books the same way. So
What are some of the books that you read?
One of my, I read a lot of stuff now. Obviously I try to stick in my genre. But I read a lot of different things. I mean, I love everything from Bill Bryson's Walk in the Woods to James Lee Burke is one of my favorite writers from the mystery genre, doing the Dave Robichaux series set down in New Orleans. And they really run the gamut. I've read a lot of horror. I read everything Stephen King has written, I think, other than the fact that he's probably written 3 more books while we were doing this. Those I haven't caught up with yet, but I do tend to read everything he writes. So yeah, it's really a little bit of everything. And like I say, when I'm doing a lot of the blurb requests now, it's really great getting to read arcs, sometimes from writers I have not previously read. I enjoy that. It's kind of nice to see other people's style and other people's writing, ability or storytelling, the way they spin a yarn. I find that fascinating. So there's always something to learn.
And one of the descriptions I read, I don't remember where I read it, but the series it was called a procedural.
Mhm.
Can you explain what that is?
It always
And is
sounded
it that?
boring. Right, it is. It is absolutely. It always sounded boring to me. It sounded like one of those college classes you wouldn't sign up for unless you had no choice. Police procedural really is just a way of shelving, I guess, the mystery genre when you have a main character that is an active law enforcement officer. So it separates it out from the amateur sleuth, from the PI, that kind of thing. So your main character is in fact a police officer or a police detective. That's what makes it a procedural. So really, by the way that you've structured the story already, by having a main character be that way, it tends to be heavy on procedure. It kind of has to be, or your story would be outlandish. I don't have to come up with a reason that the woman that bakes pies at the shop down the street, why she would be out investigating a murder. I don't have to do that. I've already got a character who's actually assigned to do it. So it's a whole different genre of a book. And I guess police procedural was the coolest thing they could come up with, but they should do better. I just find that it doesn't sound exciting, but it is exciting.
It's definitely not a cozy mystery.
No, not a cozy. I don't put graphic sex or violence or that kind of thing in there, but I write enough around it that you can imply things that are happening. I tell people, if you've read Tess Gerritsen, who was a doctor before she became a well-known writer, she gets into a lot more detail on her autopsies than I do on mine. So,
yeah, my wife is a huge fan of hers, her Zolian Isles and stuff, and we are gonna have the pleasure of interviewing her for her new book in July.
Oh, good for you!
So excited about
good
this. She wrote
you.
it. It's with I wish I could remember his name. He's from Maine, maybe Massachusetts. We did a panel with him with the Sisters in Crime thing, and he was on one of the panels, and he mentioned it. And his rep just got back to me a few
That's
weeks
great.
ago and asking me if I still wanted to do it. And I said, well, of course
I
do.
Of course you do. No, she's a great writer and a great lady. She's like I say, she's one of the ones I count among the very giving in this field. She's great. She's smart. She's a great writer.
Yep.
But she does do a tough autopsy. I don't go that far into the weeds. So that's the doctor side of her.
Well, I was going to ask about that later, but might as well just hit on it now. How far is too far for you? Did you find that when you were writing that you said, you know what, no, that's just too graphic, or you know what, let's go a little further on this one this time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to. I feel like, if I was writing these 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I think I would probably feel different on the subject. But I feel today like people know so much about this, from, even though TV a lot of times gets it wrong, there isn't much they don't show on TV anymore, especially if you're under the streaming or the cable channels. There isn't much left to the imagination. I mean, I feel like, if you're 25, 30 years old, you've probably seen the television version of an autopsy. And we never got that far into, I mean, growing up, I watched Quincy and I love the idea behind it, but we never really got that far down that road. So I feel like there's so much that the readers know, especially in this genre. I feel like mystery readers, they can't get enough mystery. And if you like police procedural, you can't get enough of that. So I feel like the readers are already fairly learned in their what they've digested so far, that I can skirt around something, but let you fill in the blanks with your own imagination without getting too far down that road. And I feel like I think you just know it. I mean, I've done 4 books now. I'm working on the 5th. I think it would be glaring to me if I went outside of what I would consider the way I want these stories to go. So if that makes sense, I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yep. You had mentioned, and we had talked about this briefly before we started this. You watch crime shows. You had mentioned Law and Order. And the other one you mentioned, watching with your wife. Are some of the cases, main part of the cases in your books, or even just some side things, kind of ripped from the headlines type of thing, from real life cases that you've had to deal with? Or
I haven't done that. I have not done that yet. And like I say, I think that's me being true to my not writing true crime thing. That's not to say that, if something struck my fancy that was, ripped from the headlines, that I wouldn't go with that. But I really like the idea and the freedom of being able to make it up from start to finish. The books themselves, because of the time that I did on the job, are filled with very realistic scenes. But a lot of those are, the political scenes that happen, the behind the scenes things that happen. Not so much the actual crime or that kind of stuff. I tend to, like I say, I really kind of want to shy away from that. So really, I haven't done that yet. I know a lot of like you mentioned, Law and Order, a lot of those, they really do. The episode, you can tell, is ripped entirely from the headlines. I haven't done that yet. I haven't felt that need, where I have the void that I can't come up with a plot that I can't make up on my own. So not yet. I don't know. That might, again, never say never, but I haven't done that yet.
So some of the technical aspects of the writing, or not the writing, but the story.
Mhm.
You obviously had a prominent position in the force, but obviously there are certain things that you probably don't know or just know a little bit of. Did you ever,
Mhm.
when you were done with a portion of your manuscript, or say even a chapter where there was a technical part that you know a little bit of, but you're not quite sure, did you go to some
Oh yeah.
former colleagues or whatever to take a look at this, read this over, and see if I'm kind of accurate on this?
I have. I've done that from a police technical sense. I've done it with evidence technicians. I've done it with medical examiner that used to be the chief medical examiner for the state of Maine, Dr. Greenwald. She's been a big help in these to make sure that I don't go too far astray from what reality might be if I want to do something cool with a storyline. And I've also gone to officers that I respected and trusted to give me the honest scoop in trying to write a realistic alcoholic. I worked with people that suffered from that are recovering alcoholics, and I've been lucky that some of them were very open and willing to share their own experiences, so that I could sort of encapsulate that and capture that in a more realistic fashion. There's a big difference between me, knowing somebody who's an alcoholic and somebody actually having gone through it. And so I've been lucky in that regard. I did the same thing with a police shooting. My third novel, Beyond the Truth, gets right into that, where an officer is accused of shooting an unarmed teenager, and that goes sideways, as you might imagine. And I had personally been involved in investigating the aftermath of police shootings, but I had never been the police shooter. So my perspective was vastly different from the perspective of the officer involved in the shooting. And I've been blessed enough that officers that had been in that position were willing to share that information with me, and what it felt like for them, and what the pressures were, what the things were that I never saw from my viewpoint. And then I was able to use that in these stories to make them much more realistic. So,
How hard was that for you to hear those stories, and how hard was it for them to relive those stories?
um, very difficult. It was, I think it was hard for me to realize exactly to what extent, these people's lives are affected by these things. There's a big difference between me making a death notification and me being the person being told that somebody I care about and love has been killed. It's that same kind of, they're not even close. And it was very emotional for the people that have shared that with me. So like I say, I'm forever grateful that they were willing to do that. But I think it adds a lot to the books, and I think it makes these stories really come to life and pop, because I'm not just writing the procedure of what happened. I'm also writing these people's lives into these stories. So you actually, as the reader, hopefully will feel what John Byron feels. You'll feel what these other characters feel. From the beginning, I really wanted people to feel like they were going along for the ride, and not just reading as an outsider, but actually in the car with John Byron or Diane Joyner, or in the house trying to clear and find the bad guy, gun out in the middle of the night. I wanted you to feel like you were part of what was happening. And for me, the way to do that is to get as much realism and as much of that inner viewpoint that only an officer who's been through it could give you. So I've been
Make,
lucky that I've had people that have been willing to fill in those blanks for me.
make it as authentic as possible.
Exactly. Yep.
So how did you start your career?
Uh, well, my dream of becoming the next Stephen King was thwarted at the college level. And I realized that I would have to find something else to do. And it was as simple as my uncle was a 35-year police officer in a nearby town. And I grew up, really having him as one of the role models that I looked to. And that really kind of shaped my viewpoint of police. I was no different probably than any other kid. I got pulled over a number of times for doing things I shouldn't have been. And I was always looking in my rearview mirror. But I respected the job. I respected what they did. And because of my uncle, I knew more about what they actually did as opposed to just following people like me around as a teenager. And that was just one of the logical things I figured I'd try out. If I couldn't do the thing I really wanted to do, which was write, I would try that. And it just worked out. I quit the job I had. I started moving furniture for a living, delivering furniture, appliances and couches and that kind of thing, and applying to every police department for the test when they offered them around here that I could. And I was offered a job by the Portland Police Department in August, I guess, of '85. And that was it. I never looked back. Took a cut in pay to go from delivering furniture to be a police cadet at that point. And I never looked back. Never imagined I'd be doing it 30 years later.
Did you start off as a?
The upside is that I actually had something to write about after that career. So that was a blessing in disguise. I had no idea that I'd return to this. So,
did you start off as a patrolman and just kind of over the years work your way up in the ranks?
Yep.
Or?
Yep, like everyone. I did my time on the street. One of my first assignments was a uniform foot beat on the overnight. Once I got out of the training, and you work your way up the way everybody does. You get a crappy car in the middle of nowhere where nothing happens, and you work your way into a busy car where it's hopping all night long. And I did a number of different things. I was on the fatal investigation action reconstruction unit. I was a drill sergeant at the academy. I did all kinds of stuff. That for 4 years I spent on loan to the FBI doing counterterrorism for the Boston division. I got to do a lot of things that were great experiences. I mean, these are the things that I draw from to write what I write. So,
you had mentioned developing your other characters. So, when you were developing these other characters, did you ever have an instance where you have a character that you enjoyed building, enjoyed their storyline throughout, but either you knew you had to kill them off at some point, or let go?
Yes, I don't think when I started doing it, I was necessarily conscious of who would get the axe and who wouldn't, kind of a thing. But I did know that there would come a point in time where I would do that to the reader, and much to the chagrin of the reader, and some of them to their ire, I guess I have to deal with. But I think if it makes sense. There are certain things that I knew I wanted to tell, certain parts of the job I wanted to tell. And I've occasionally taken out a character that I didn't want to, and the reader might not necessarily want me to, but I think that's all part of the game. I mean, so it's easy killing off a bad guy because no one sheds a tear. It's hard to do it when it's somebody that the readers have come to care about, and that you yourself have come to care about. And I don't want to do that too often because, my God, that'll really leave holes in my team. But yeah, that does happen, and I think it definitely adds an emotional component to these books, which I find important. If I can make the reader mad, I want to make them mad. If I can make them shed a tear, then so much the better. So, and it's funny because there are scenes that I have written that have actually done that. I'm drawing on my own experiences to write some of these, and so the scenes may be a little too close to home, and I've gotten choked up writing some of these scenes. So it's always nice to hear that the reader had the same reaction, because that means I've done something right. So I like that. I think that's kind of cool.
Kind of on the flip side, you see Byron just kind of took on a life of his own type of thing. And was there a very minor character you really didn't like the way they came out, but you stuck it in because it was a minor character, but then all of a sudden that character just took off on a mind of its own, and you can't find a way to get rid of them, because either your fans came to like that character, be it because they're evil, bad or good, but
Right.
you just find that that character fits in this spot. All right, we'll give him this spot and that's it. But then
Right.
maybe another chapters or a book down the road. All right, I'm going to use that character one more time.
Right. Well, it's the ones that actually cause the most problems are the best characters, because they keep the action going. They keep the unknown going. It ups that chaos quotient. You have no idea what's going to happen next. And those sometimes can be annoying if you're the writer, but they make for great stress and conflict if you are the reader. So for me, one of mine has been Davis Billingsley. He is the police beat reporter for the Portland Herald, and he is a thorn in the side of John Byron. And he actually didn't have that big a role in the first book, or at least in the first version of the first book. My editor got a hold of that and really loved that character and asked me to expand it. And I thought, oh my God, I've done it now. I'm going to be stuck with Davis Billingsley for life. And so Davis has managed to make it into the fifth book. I don't know how long that will go, but I remember somebody a long time ago cautioning me, another writer, be very careful if you put a dog or a cat into your series, because you can't kill them off. Your readers will never talk to you again. And with a dog, they're constantly going to send you emails about, how can John Byron leave the dog alone that much and blah, blah, blah. So I realized that thanks to my editor, Davis Billingsley has become that pet. I'm stuck with him. So I don't know what to do.
Well, do you ever think of doing a spin-off series with some of these, like Davis, and just kind of giving him his own, like,
right?
2.5 or within plain sight 4.2 or a little novella thing?
You never know.
I actually had interviewed two fantasy romance writers who, actually one in particular, she has easily 7, 8, 9 different series that she writes, and each one has at least 4+ books in each one. And it's great. She has on her website, you click on the series and it lists all the books in the series, but in order. But then there's little offshoots with book 1.5
Wow.
and book 3.5, wow. So you can read you read them all straight, and then so my thoughts are very
my brain
product.
doesn't work like that. I can't even imagine. I really can't. It's funny. I was saying I've been trying to finish a standalone. I've got a number of standalones started that I feel like were good ideas, but I haven't quite fleshed them out enough to have them carry me to the end of the book. So I've set those aside. And but while I was doing it, it was really like my John Byron characters were standing on the other side of the room watching me and passing judgment, because I'm supposed to be writing about them. So yeah, it's kind of weird. You create enough of these imaginary people, and that's who you spend your day with. I mean, that really is it. They become more real to the writer, I think, than the people that, I don't spend as much time with my wife as I spend with these fictional characters. So, it's a little weird. So yeah, I don't know if I could add more of them to the room. On the other side of the room, it's getting crowded over there. So,
so how do you write the book? Do you do an outline? Do you just kind of a pantser, go off the seat of your pants, or kind of a little combination of both? What's your
combo.
process?
It's a combo. I think I'd call myself a hybrid in that regard. Every book is different. I mean, I can honestly tell you that none of these books have been done exactly the same way. And it really is because it depends. Like the third book, really, I actually did sit down and plot that all out. And it's a rarity that I would do that. And the only reason I did it is because the really probably 80% of the idea came to me fleshed out. And I wanted to get it all down before I forgot about it, because under contract, I was only working on the second book at the point I got the idea for the third book. I was halfway through number 2. I hadn't done the final edits on the first book yet, as we were approaching that point of doing that. And I knew I couldn't even begin thinking about writing the third book for another 1.5 years. So when I did it, I wanted to really be very detailed in what it was about so that it wouldn't slip my mind. And so that third book, my God, by the time they told me that the second novel, they were accepting, the version I gave them, and we were moving on to copy edits. That was like opening the gate and let me take off at Suffolk Downs, right? I was ready to sprint. I was ready to write that book because it had been in my head rolling around for a year and a half. But they don't all happen like that. I find I have the best luck sometimes if I have a real loose idea of where I want to start, where I want to end, and how I want to get there, and what the book is about. But I really like to leave some of those elements open to chance, because your initial ideas usually aren't as good as what the final product will end up being. And it's because as you're writing stuff, you'll think of things that you hadn't thought of before. So the book may take a turn you hadn't planned on, or this or that. And I feel like it's better to leave a little bit of that open so that it can kind of happen naturally. I feel like that's the best writing when that happens.
When you were going through your editing yourself, well, question one, do you write the entire manuscript first, then go back and do all the editing, or do you do it by paragraphs, by chapters, kind of give yourself a break from the writing and go back and look through it? Case in point, we had one author who goes paragraph by paragraph and make sure that all the words are correct and everything sounds kind of tedious, but how do you well, I guess my point that I was trying to get to though was, as you're editing, have you ever found yourself saying, uh-oh, that didn't happen back there, and so chapters or paragraphs
Right.
don't jive, or you found out that you backed yourself into a corner? Okay, how am I going
Yeah.
to get myself out of this one?
Yeah, I edit as I go. Usually I feel like it's a stretching exercise. So whatever I wrote the previous day will be edited first thing the next morning. And it would just naturally take me into the day's writing. Like it's just sort of a normal launching off point. Yeah, you can back yourself even as carefully as I write these. It's 400 pages. There's just no way that you didn't screw up someplace. I'll change a name halfway through the book and then forget that I did it. And as I'm reading it again, I'll be like, who the hell is this? Like I've forgotten who the character was. And then you realize, oh, that's right, I renamed them. Or you'll set the book up on purpose on a certain day of the week, and something needs to happen on another certain day of the week, and you find out that it doesn't work, that your timeline is now off. So if you make a change to anything, it's going to screw up the whole book. Those are killers to find, and usually you don't find those until way late in the process. So it definitely behooves you as a writer to spend time making sure that you have some of those things sorted out so you don't have any major surprises.
What was the biggest rewrite that you had to do because of something like that?
There
Like a
was
whole paragraph, whole chapter?
No, there were some key points in the third book, and it was really only because I had chosen differently on how things were going to go in that third book. I mean, the actual plot stayed the same, but a couple of small changes that my editor wanted ended up being major changes in the way the story was told. And we had some back and forth phone calls that were heated over this. I was trying to stand my guns, to stand up for what I thought was right. And we spent a lot of time talking about it. And at the end of the day, I decided that the changes that he wanted were the proper changes, that it really, even though it was making some major changes to where the book was headed, the storyline and what I was trying to do would still be accomplished, and maybe in a better way. And so luckily I went along with that. I made those changes, and that became to date, at least the most lauded book, award wise, that kind of a thing. So I'd say they were the right things. But it's funny, as a writer, you spend so much time with this. It's like, it's like your kid. And if someone tries to tell you something, it's not right about them, and, whatever, you love your kid, even, if they have three eyes or whatever, you still love them. They're your kid. Mm-hmm. And to have somebody point that out to you, that the three eyes isn't going to work, you get a little testy. So, right. But, it's one of the things you have to learn. And it feels like I learned that with every book. I have to remind myself that my editor and all the people in the process are there to make the book better. Mm-hmm. And then I need to stand back and take a look at it from a different viewpoint than the guy who wrote it. So,
have any of your readers ever found something that just it got missed by you, it got missed by the editors for whatever it is? And I'm talking about little spelling mistakes that happen every once in a while. I mean, something that, wait a minute, wasn't the name there, or what happened to the dog, or something like that,
Yeah, no, nothing major. Luckily for us. Yeah, no, you always have someone will always send you the email telling you they found a typo or or whatever the deal is. But yeah, to date, I don't think we've had anything that was really major. You know, you hate to see anything wrong with these, but I don't care whose books you're reading, you'll find mistakes even by the major names. It's just it's the way it is. It's hard for everybody to look at it and nobody to miss something. So there's always that. But yeah, no, to date, I don't think we've had any major faux pas, which is always good. Now that I say it, I should knock on wood somewhere. I'm going to be in trouble. So
Now you have your setting in the book set in Portland, so
Yep.
an actual city.
Right.
Well, first, why an actual city versus a made up one?
Well, originally I was going to make one up. I kind of like that idea, and I thought, geez, you know, I can set this any place. I could, if I want to set it in Maine, I could make up the fictional town thing, a la Murder, She Wrote, that kind of a thing. But the more I thought about it, I thought, well, one of the things I wanted to be able to do in the series was create a place that felt as much like a character as any of my characters in the book. I wanted the place to matter, not just be someplace to set the series. And which is what I think every town does to those of us that live in them. I mean, I think they become part of your life. You know the places, you know the people, you know the atmosphere, the weather, the whole thing. And for me, it really came to me that it made no sense to ignore the 30-year plus love-hate relationship I've had with the city of Portland, to not use that and exploit that in a way that I could tell a better story. So, I knew all the glitzy places and the glamorous places and the new bars down in the old port that everybody wanted to go to, and what it's like to try and walk on the cobblestone streets at night and stay upright. But I also knew where all the bad things had occurred, because I'd been there investigating them. So to me, that was a good thing, to be able to take the good and the bad and make Portland really a real character for me. So that's why I chose The Real Thing.
I love Portland. We used to go there at least a couple times a year in the summertime, or especially in the winter. We'd go to take the kids when they were really young to the State Theater and see the Nutcracker every year, and then go down to, was it DeMillo's?
DeMillo's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and have dinner there as the big treat for the kids, so they can get their lobster and stuff. And
Yep.
And even instead of retiring, because I actually retired well before I had to,
Mm-hmm.
because I had to retire at 56, but I cut it a few years early. I even thought of transferring to Portland Airport and working
Wow.
there. It's only 45 minutes, 50 minutes from my house.
Right.
So I thought about that for a little while, until I had to drive to Manchester in a snowstorm, and thought that, well, I'm gonna have to still do that going up to Portland.
Right,
That's probably gonna be even worse. So no, that idea's out. So where you have people sending you emails and stuff about, typos and things like that, were you ever worried about writing things about Portland? Not, the ins and outs of Portland, so there's probably
Right.
not a lot, but changing a name of a particular bar or a particular establishment or store, or did you leave real names in there? And were you worried about people saying, no, that's not the right cross street, or that's not the right place on that corner, it's now this?
Yeah, I was less worried about that. I was talking to another writer up here, Jim Heyman, and he intentionally made, in his first book in his series, he had a heart transplant thing going on, and someone was stealing hearts, and he named the Maine Medical Center, which everyone knows as the Maine Medical Center, the Cumberland Medical Center. Just took the name from the county and called it that. And the reason he did that was because he knew that Maine Medical Center didn't do heart transplants. And so, but then he started getting emails from people saying, it's not called the Cumberland Medical Center. So basically what he told me was, you can't win. So you kind of do whatever you want. I don't know why some of the businesses I've made up entirely, which is just easy to do. When you're writing a book, you can do whatever you want. I mean, I can mold the city into what I want it to be. Sometimes I've renamed businesses that are actually real businesses, and sometimes I've used The Real Thing. It's one of those things. I think it's just your taste as a writer, what you want to do, what you're hoping to do. I know you can't do anything. You can't do anything too disparaging for an existing business, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think you might find yourself in litigation if you did that with some of these books. But no, I like using real places if I can. The second book, Beneath the Depths, features prominently with what you just mentioned, DeMillo's, but it's also DeMillo's Marina, where they sell the boats and stuff, and dock the boats and all that kind of stuff. So Yeah, no, I like to use a lot of the places that I enjoyed going to, and insert those into John's life. So you see a lot of those kinds of things, Bullfini's, Riraz. John makes the rounds. He's been, and every once in a while he'll try something new because Diane will make him try something new. So that's always good too.
So with those businesses that you didn't change the name, did you ever get a reader or somebody who worked there or owns that business say, "Hey, thanks for putting us in your book,"
Oh yeah,
or the opposite? Can you not do that next time?
right. No, I haven't had anything negative, which is good. But yeah, no, the businesses always appreciate the plug. I think that's funny. I've gone into places that I've done that with, and walk in and you see copies of the book laying around or whatever. So I know that's a cool thing for them. So everyone likes a mention. So
Yep. So when you go through your edits, how many edits do you do? Do you do so many edits before you send it off to the official editor at the publisher, or do you spend it time wise? Say, okay, I'm going to spend a week editing this, and after that, I've done all I can. It's going to go on no matter what.
I think every book is different. In this one that I'm writing right now, I'm writing without a contract. We haven't even talked about that yet. I want the time to be able to get this written. So, really, I don't have that rush. When you're operating on a deadline, everything is different. You may not have as many chances to go through it as you normally would if there was no deadline. But then again, as a writer, I can tell you that, if they gave us unlimited time, we would never finish these books because you want everything to be perfect and just so. So you do the best you can. I can tell you that since I edit every single day, even on days that I'm writing new stuff, I can't even tell you how many times I go through these. When I finally turn it over to my editor for his approval, it's in pretty good shape. But I know that there's going to be more to be done. I know that there's things I'll want to add or fine tune or enhance. And I know that he'll have suggestions about things that he thinks work or don't work. So there still may be some major changes even at that point. So, and then really, once you get to the final thing, which is the copy edits, it's always terrifying to do the yay or nay on all the suggestions, make the final changes, and send it off because you know that whatever warts are on there are going to be on there when it comes out in print too. So that's always the terrifying. That's the hard part for me, letting go for that. So
Now, sitting in a bookstore, customer walks in, the first thing they see is the cover, and it's true. It's the cover is what they see first, and you judge a book by its cover.
Right.
How much say did you have in producing the cover art for your books?
I really didn't have a lot to say about it. I mean, they gave me on the first book, I know there were a few suggestions or a few examples that they come up with. But the one that we went with, I loved. I mean, it was a no-brainer. I thought they really did a nice job on that first cover. And the others just sort of fell into, once they had the silhouette theme going, the others really just sort of fell into, they would look at places or scenes that I had described in the book and come up with something that worked, that was very relevant, but also tasteful. And I thought the first three were great. It wasn't until the fourth one that they decided to go a little outside the norm. And you'll notice from looking at this, we didn't do the silhouette theme on this one. And I loved it. I thought it was great. It was a departure from that. It had a fresh feel to it, which to me felt like, John Byron. I had taken John Byron from book 1 to book 3 with that intentional opening character arc, and I had taken him as far as I thought I would take him. I didn't know if the book would, the series would continue beyond the first 3. And so for me, this was like a second chapter or the next part of John's life, this fourth book, where he would go from here. And so to have that cover change, I thought was perfect. I thought it was symbolic. And you've got that sunset scene going on, the bright colors. It's almost a hopeful feel. But then you've got the shadowy, the city down below, and there's still something going on there. So I just felt like it did a nice job of capturing that whole essence.
Now, is that Portland?
I've been very lucky. It is Portland. Yeah, that shot that you're looking at is actually taken from across the harbor from the South Portland side. So.
So did they choose that one either as something different, or because, like you said with the other books, it was something prominent? The city itself is very prominent in this particular book.
No, I don't think so much. I think that might have been more of a marketing decision. I just like the way that it's kind of set us off on a new
Mhm.
direction. Because like I say, in my mind, I'd taken John from where he was when we meet him to where he is at the end of the third book, which was a big, a big leap in how far he develops and what's happening in his life. And then in the fourth book, it's really, okay, here's John Byron now. This is where he is in his life. How will he continue to function as a detective sergeant? And so I thought it was great. Like I said, it feels like it's that fresh start look to that cover.
And you said you're working on book 5.
Yes.
Anything after that? Well, is there anything you can tell us about book 5, or is that?
Well, it's tentatively titled Under the Gun. It would appear I've not run out of prepositional phrases to throw on the cover yet. And John is back in a tough place because he's actually investigating a murder of one of his old college professors. And it appears that college professor may have been investigating a Portland case, specifically a wrongful conviction. At least that's what was alleged. So because of that, John's now going to have to delve into this other case that was investigated before him by old Portland detectives. And as you might imagine, that is going to cause some problems. So John's life will not be any easier in the fifth book. Hence Under the Gun.
So book 6, book 7, however long you want to continue the series, or think you can continue the series, you ever think of going back to some of your short stories and using them as sort of the nucleus of the plot for any of the subsequent books?
I think about it. I don't know that. To me, they'd have to be fleshed out a lot more. It'd have to be something that just stayed in my head. That's where, a lot of times where the novels come from. They just have to live there long enough where they start to sprout arms and legs and become a real book. Over time, who knows? I tell people I don't know what I don't know, and I've come this far and learned so much. I can't tell you what I'm going to know 10 years from now that may affect my decision making on all this stuff. But for the time being, I'm really enjoying writing this series, and it's the spark of what might be out there to still write is kind of a cool thing.
Because
Hopefully, I can do both.
you had mentioned way back at the beginning that writing a short story, you just have to get to the nuts and bolts of the story, because you only have a few thousand words to get it done in.
Right.
So going back through your notebooks or manuscripts, whatever, and saying, okay, you know what, yeah, I can expand on here, I can expand on there, and then things start rolling along. You ever think of doing something like that? Or
Right. I haven't done that yet. Like I say, it's one of those things you always think about, but I have taken short stories that were never finished and used those when I realized that what I had written could be easily shaped into a scene that I needed for one of my books. I have done that. A short story that I was writing actually ended up becoming the opening scene for book 2. And I never imagined that happening. I just didn't like where my book opened, and the answer ended up being in a short story I'd never finished. So you never know where you're going. That's why you don't throw anything away. For any of the writers out there listening to this, throw nothing that you've written away. You never know where it might fit in. So
now, is all yours on paper, or is it part paper, part flash drive,
cloud,
or cloud?
paper, flash drive, yeah, everywhere, you name it, napkins, whatever it happens to be on. Yeah, I don't throw stuff away. It's good. Plus, even the bad stuff that I've written, I think it's good to see where you've come and how much you've improved on. You never know, one of those bad things I wrote may get legs and be recreated and reborn at some point into something else. So.
So you're part of the Mystery Writers of America, Sisters in Crime New England. What's the mystery blog?
I write along with a number of other writers that are all from the law field, either attorneys or judges or former law enforcement or PI, all that kind of thing. We write a book called the Murder Books blog, and our tagline is that it's murder by people who know, kind of thing. And so we write a little bit about everything. We write about writing, we write about our trials and tribulations, but we also write about the jobs that we know and the reality of those jobs, so that it's kind of a neat look for people. And I think they can probably see where some of our experiences or our histories, how we end up weaving those into our books. So that's kind of a cool thing that we do. You can find us online on Facebook. We have the Murder Books page. if people want to read those. So we have varied experiences, but we all know and love what we did and what we do. So I think that's kind of cool.
Now, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways because I love asking it. Would you love to see, or how bad would you like to see your books on some sort of screen, be it a Netflix or TV series, movie, big screen?
If they did it right, I would be over the moon. I guess even if they did it wrong, I'd be over the moon, because generally there'd be a paycheck in that. And the worst thing to have happen wouldn't necessarily be having your book turned into a movie. If they did it right, I'd be elated. I think it would be awesome. And I'll give you two examples of ones that I find are awesome. And that is the first season of True Detective. I absolutely loved. I thought that was brilliantly done. It was dark. The acting was great. The writing was great. It had really all those kind of things you look for, I think, in a good book. And then the Bosch series. I really love the Bosch series, which sounds like, unfortunately, is coming to an end. But I thought that was done well. And I think the reason it was done so well is because Michael Connelly has such a prominent role in its production. And from what I gather, he really stipulated to that, which is why it was never made before this. He wanted to be involved in production and finally got to a point where he was able to do that. So for me, I think it would be great if I was involved in the process. The Longmire TV series is another great example. Craig Johnson's books, I think, have been captured very, very well. There are changes that they made for the TV series, but I don't think it costs the series anything. And if anything, the fact that they're different in some respects makes it even more fun for people to see the show and read the novels that he's still writing. So no, I think it would be great. I think it would be another shot in the arm and more life for John Byron and what I'm doing. I think it would be kind of cool to see the way somebody else portrays what I have written, the way somebody else sees what I see. So, because I'm guessing that the people I'm creating, the imaginary people, don't look the same standing on the other side of somebody else's room. So it would be neat to see how they're portrayed by somebody else.
When you created your characters, did you have a particular look or a particular actor or actress in mind when you created them?
Not when I created them, but I did find, as I was getting through near the end of the first book, that my characters and what I envisioned them as was becoming fuzzy. The actual, look, if I wanted to look up and see them, it was becoming a little more fuzzy. And so the way I solved that problem was I went online and I found pictures of people, sometimes famous people, sometimes not famous people, but they looked very much like what I envisioned my characters looking like to begin with. And then I just printed those photos out black and white, stuck them on a whiteboard, and wrote my character's name beneath them, and they became my character. And I don't want to ruin this for anyone that may be visualizing John Byron differently, but Daniel Craig for me was that, he still had the sex appeal. He's got some miles on him. He's a little rough around the edges. He's still a ladies' man. And he looks like he could get the job done. I sort of in my own mind. Right, exactly. He's 007. I pictured John Byron as a taller version, I think, of him, but I wanted that same kind of, feel and look to John Byron. So, but I'm sure that's not what everybody pictures him as, but that's how I sort of put him together.
So that's who you'd pick if you could pick anybody to play?
Yeah, he'd have to learn to speak like he was from Maine. That might be an issue, but short of that, I guess they have brilliant coaches in that. So, but yeah, no, I think he would be great. I think there's a number of people that would be great for him. I've watched a lot of different things now, and I realize as time goes on that John Byron could be a lot of different actors that could pull that off. So, but Daniel Craig was the first one I came up with. So,
do you write the Maine dialogue, the dialect into?
Not
to the
very
dialogue?
seldom.
Yeah.
No, very seldom. Some of the secondary characters that appear, in an individual book may have that. That's one of those things where you watch a TV show and everyone in Maine sounds the same, and we don't sound the same. I mean, there's a big difference between the county up in northern Maine and the down East Coast lobstermen and all that kind of stuff. It really depends on where you hail from. So I don't go overboard with that, but every once in a while there may be a little bit of that. So Besides, as you can tell from listening to me tonight, I have no accent, so there would be no reason for that, right?
Right. That's funny. We lived out in San Diego for a while, and for the longest time, people would not make fun of my accent, but I would say certain things because I'm from New Hampshire, and
Right.
they would say, "Well, your accent's showing through again." But then after living out there for 6 or 7 years, coming back here, evidently
Right.
I'd adopted the Southern California accent.
Exactly.
Coming
Yeah.
back here, and of course I wouldn't notice it. But so,
Right.
are any of your books in audiobook form, or any plans to do audiobooks?
The third one currently is Beyond the Truth is an audiobook. It was recorded by Harper Audio. Adam Verna was the actor that did the recording. He did a nice job on that. The other three to this point have not been done audiobook, and I don't know what will happen with that. I think at every point something concerning sales probably drives the decision making process. But I enjoyed listening to somebody else actually, read the words. It's like hearing somebody read you a story. Even though I wrote the book, it's a whole different aspect to it. I thought that's fun. So every once in a while, if I'm on a trip, I listen to a lot of audiobooks. Every once in a while, mine will roll through the rotation and I'll hear it again. So it's kind of fun.
We spoke to Leslie Wheeler. She's kind of a prominent high up in the Sisters in Crime organization.
Yeah.
She said that when she listened to her Rattlesnake Hill, which just came out last week in audiobook form, that she realized that she said certain phrases too many times. Do you find that when you were listening to your book being narrated?
No, and I shouldn't say that. Maybe I have. What I find helpful at this point is my last edit on a book will be I'll read the entire book to myself out loud, and you catch things that you wouldn't catch, either clunky dialogue or repetition in phrases, that kind of thing. So I think that is one of the ways you find that out. But I wouldn't want it to be from somebody else's reading. I think if I can continue to do what I'm doing, I think that helps a lot. It's almost like the reading I just did for you. There's a big difference between that reading and one that I did maybe back in the first book, where once you hear yourself read the thing out loud, you're like, geez, I shouldn't have written it like this, or I would have done it like that. I think that does help because I think there's just a natural pattern to speech, and you like what you like, and you'll catch things that you wouldn't catch just on the written page.
Would you ever want to narrate one of your other books if you had the chance?
I would, but I would be afraid that people might like it, and then I'll be stuck doing every single book, and I don't know that time is going to lend itself to that. So I know that's a pretty inhibitive process. There's a lot of work that goes into what they do. So, but I would certainly not pass that down if that opportunity came my way. I think it would be fun to do. So I don't know how good my Diane Joyner voice would be. This is it right here. So I don't know if you'd know that was a female talking or not, but I might need coaching.
Okay. So if you could have, last question, if you could have any voice, be it actor, actress, or if you know of any particular voice actors or actresses, who would be it for John in the next audiobook?
Yes, I don't know who I would. I mean, like I say, I think Adam Berna did a great job. One of my favorite audiobook readers to listen to is Will Patton, and he's an actor that does all of James Lee Burke's books, and I cannot read a James Lee Burke book and not hear Will Patton's voice. So I don't know how well that would translate to Maine, but man, when it comes to New Orleans and that kind of thing, he nails it. So,
well, the next book will have to be set down in New Orleans, and
right. John takes a trip.
That's right. Did you ever think about that? So I guess it's not the final question. So this will be the final question. Did you ever think about taking John out of Portland and going on vacation, or for some reason, or getting called to assist on something because of some expertise thing that he has?
If it made sense, I just think it would be a lot of work. You know what I mean? I think people might miss the Portland area that centers all of these. I have him go to Boston in the fourth book, but I don't know if I'd want to stay an entire book outside of Portland. I think Portland's just too much of a character, too much a part of John. So for the time being, we're going to stay right there.
All right. Well, we're going to call it a night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
We've got all 4 books are available. We don't have them in store yet. We'll have them soon, but in the meantime, they are available through bookshop.org, which is a great company that helps support us. we get a portion of sales, and you can definitely get it through probably your website as well, brucerobertcoffin.com.
Mhm.
Lots of great stuff on his website. For the audiobook, I was trying to look it up, but my other computer decided that it wasn't going to be very cooperative. So I was going to look it up on Libro FM, which is the partner company, audiobook company that we partner with for sales. But go to libro.fm and see if you can find his third book on there, and hopefully we'll see the rest of them on there. Bruce,
Great.
again, thank you very much, and hopefully this summer or sometime very soon. You said August was going to be busy for you, but
Yeah, yeah.
sometime soon we'll have you in the store for an in-person event.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much, Chris. And
You're
thanks to
welcome.
everybody watching.
Yeah, thank you for everybody on Facebook Live. Thanks to everybody here, and hope everybody has a safe and a good night and good summer.